poor boy promises, "Black girl, I'll marry you when I'm rich." He comes back years later. The bell above the salon door gives a soft, tired ring, the kind of sound that doesn't turn heads anymore, just slips into the air and disappears. He almost doesn't step in. His hand is still on the handle when the smell hits him: hair grease and warm combs, faint hairspray, that mix of coconut oil and something floral. It folds around him in one slow wave, older than the cologne on his neck, older than the leather of the jacket he bought to look like he belonged somewhere else. For a second he just stands in the doorway, suit catching the afternoon light, briefcase hanging from his fingers, not quite entering and not quite leaving. He feels a breeze on his back as the door swings shut behind him, and the bell gives a second, softer jingle. No one looks up. The salon is smaller than he remembers. Or maybe he's just bigger now. 4 chairs in a row. A cracked mirror where someone taped a picture of a baby with a wide smile and the words "First Cut" in blue marker. Plastic capes hanging from a hook, shiny and worn. On the wall, faded posters of women with perfect curls and perfect smiles. A radio hums low in the corner, an old R&B song, but the words are swallowed under the buzz of a hand dryer and the murmur of 2 women in the back arguing softly about someone's cousin. Life is happening in here, the everyday kind. His presence doesn't change the air. She's there, behind the second chair from the window. Back to him, head bent, her hands moving in small, expert motions through a little girl's hair. The girl sits on a booster seat, sneakers not quite touching the footrest, swinging her legs back and forth in slow rhythm. Beads click softly as Naya pulls a section of hair tight, fingers flying, parting, twisting. He recognizes the way she moves even before he's close enough to see her face, focused, careful, humming something under her breath, barely louder than a thought. He knows that hum, used to fall asleep to it through thin apartment walls. He tells himself to move, one step, then another. The floor has that slight stick of years of product and footsteps. With each quiet step, the sound of the outside street fades, bus brakes, car horns, kids yelling. In here, it's just the radio, the low conversation, the click of beads, the soft push of his heart against his ribs. He feels tall, too formal. His jacket creaks when he bends his arm, the cuff of his shirt brushing the expensive watch he saved for, month after month. None of it belongs in this small, warm room. He feels like he's walked onto the wrong stage. He stops a few feet from her chair. Up close, he notices the tiny details first. The way her old gold bracelet sits higher on her wrist now, almost hidden by the elastic of her glove. The small scar on the back of her hand where she once sliced herself opening a can. The strand of hair that escaped from her bun and curls against her neck, frizzed slightly by the heat. She keeps her head down, humming and braiding, like he's just another walk-in who sat in the wrong seat. The little girl in the chair glances at him, curious, then looks away, bored, her feet still swinging. He realizes he hasn't said anything. All the lines he rehearsed in the Quran, the long drive through streets that looked both familiar and strange vanish, he had planned something smoother. A joke, a gentle, "Remember me," something that would make the years fall away. Like in those videos where people reunite and everyone cries on cue, instead, there is this thick, awkward pause where even his breathing feels too loud. "Hi, Ania," he finally manages. The sound of her name in his voice hangs there. The humming stops. Her fingers freeze mid-braid, holding the small section of hair she was about to twist. The radio keeps playing, someone singing about love they should have kept. The hand dryer in the back shuts off, and for one strange second, the salon is more quiet than it should be. She doesn't turn around right away. He watches the muscles in her shoulders tighten before she moves. Then she straightens, slow, like someone waking from a long nap, and lifts her head. When she finally looks at him in the mirror, her eyes are confused, distant, like she's seeing a stranger who knows how to say her name too well. She twists a bit, just enough to face him. There's a tiny frown at the center of her forehead, that look people get when they're trying to place a face they've only seen in passing. Her eyes scan him once, quick suit, tie, briefcase, watch then land on his face. The pause stretches. His stomach drops in quiet, controlled inches. "Do I know you?" she asks. Her voice doesn't have an edge. It's not cold. It's just careful, like someone knocking on a door they're not sure they want opened. He feels the question slide inside his chest and settle somewhere dark. He had expected something else. Surprise, a gasp. That small intake of breath people do when ghosts walk back into rooms. He didn't prepare for this version, where he is the one wanting recognition, and she is the one deciding if he gets it. It hits harder than he thought it would. The years, the silence, the promise he made on a night that still lives inside him like it happened yesterday. In his head, they were frozen there, on that rooftop city, humming beneath them, and everything after was just a long hallway leading back to this moment. He thought she'd been walking down the same hallway too. He pulls his mouth into a smile, but it's the wrong one. Too fast, too polished, the kind of smile he wears in meetings when someone says something offensive but signs his checks. It feels fake on his face, but he doesn't know how to switch it off. "It's me," he says, words coming out lighter than he feels. Darius from back on Maple, the building with the broken elevator. He watches the name land, his name. Her eyes narrow, as if she's sifting through old drawers in her mind. For a moment, he sees nothing. Then, slowly, something shifts. The frown loosens. There's a flicker, a flash of another time superimposed over this one. He can almost see it in her gaze. A shadow of a rooftop, chipped concrete under their sneakers. Two kids leaning against each other, sharing cheap chips and big dreams. The sound of trains in the distance. Her laugh, his promise. It all stirs like dust rising in a room that hasn't been opened in years. "Oh," she says quietly, and there's weight in that one little sound. Recognition, memory, and something else. You, not Darius, not "oh my God," it's you. Just you. A label for a file she thought she'd closed for good. The little girl in the chair stops swinging her feet and looks between them, sensing the shift in the air, that adult tension kids don't understand but always feel. Nia turns back to the braids, her face sliding into something neutral. Her fingers move again, faster now, more mechanical. It looks almost like she's trying to hide in the work, bury whatever rose up when she heard his name. Beads click, hair snaps gently under the comb. The hum doesn't come back. He stands there, feeling like someone who missed a step in the dark. He lets his eyes wander, because looking straight at her hurts in a way he wasn't ready for. He notices the jar of blue disinfectant by the station, combs dipped like old pencils. A coffee cup with lipstick on the rim, already gone cold. A folded sweatshirt on the back of a chair. Little normal things that say, she built a life here, without you. Then his gaze drops, almost by accident, to her left hand. To the ring, it's simple. A thin band, no big stone, worn smooth at the edges like it has been there a while. It catches the light for half a second, and that's all it takes. His breath stutters. He feels stupid for even being surprised. What did he think? That she would just be there, waiting on some shelf in time, untouched, until he walked back in to claim her like a prize he earned. He swallows down whatever rises in his throat. This isn't the moment he imagined on all those lonely nights when his bank account was finally big enough to impress people who never lived on Maple. There is no triumphant return, no wide-eyed girl saying, "You did it." There is just this quiet room, and a woman who has stories written into the tired corners of her eyes that he doesn't know. "I came back," he says, and his voice drops on its own, softer, almost apologizing for existing. The words feel smaller than the weight they carry in his head. "I told you, remember? When I got rich, I said I'd marry you." As soon as he says it out loud, he hears it the way she must be hearing it, like a child's promise that somehow got dragged through too many years and showed up here, still wearing its oversized shoes. It sounds naive now, arrogant even, as if all it took was money and distance and his decision. The blow doesn't land like a movie scene. There's no dramatic gasp, no flying hands, no tears welling up on cue. The other women in the salon don't suddenly go silent and lean in. One of them laughs at something on her phone. A dryer starts again with a loud whoosh. Outside, a horn blares and a bus sighs to a stop. The world refuses to gather around his moment. She doesn't look at him when she reacts. Her eyes stay on the braid she's finishing, her fingers focused, nimble. But at the corner of her mouth, a tiny smile appears. Not the bright one he remembers, the one that used to light up that dark stairwell. This one is small, tired. It curves more in resignation than joy. "Darius," she whispers, almost like she's testing the sound of his name after all these years. Her gaze never leaves the hair in her hands as she ties off the braid with a pink rubber band. "You're late?" The words are light, soft, but they land with a dull, heavy thud inside his chest. Late, not wrong, not unwanted, just not on time. He doesn't know what measure she's using, what clock he failed. but he feels it anyway. All the years he spent chasing something he thought would fix everything. All the messages he didn't send, the calls he didn't make because he needed to focus. They all gather themselves into that one simple sentence. He stands there, suit itching at his neck, salon air thick around him, watching her finish the little girl's hair with the quiet ease of someone who has learned how to keep moving even when people leave. He opens his mouth to answer, to explain, to ask, but nothing comes out. All the stories he has, all the reasons, pile up behind his teeth like traffic. Outside, the bus pulls away, leaving behind a small cloud of dust and the fading echo of its engine. Inside, he's left with her words, and the space between who he was when he left and who he is now, wondering if either version is someone she can still recognize. Years earlier, the sky above the brick buildings on Maple was the kind of orange that made everything look softer than it really was. The sun was slipping down behind the row of tired rooftops, catching on TV antennas and old satellite dishes, painting the laundry lines and rusted vents in warm light. Down below, someone was frying chicken. Music leaked from an open window. A baby cried, then went quiet. The whole block felt like it was in that slow, in-between hour when nothing big is supposed to happen. And yet for them, something did. They sat on the edge of their building's roof, legs dangling over rough concrete, sneakers almost brushing the side of the wall. The edge was chipped in places, the old paint flaking off. They had been told 1,000 times not to sit there. You kids trying to die. But this was their spot. Once you climbed past the rusted door and stepped out onto that flat, open space, it felt like the only place in the neighborhood where the air was wide enough to breathe. Darius was 14 that summer. He had on the same black hoodie he wore almost every day, sleeves pushed up to his elbows. In the pocket of his jeans was a small, cheap medal from the city math competition. The ribbon was already fraying at the ends. His teacher said he should be proud, that it meant something. But every time he looked down at it, all he noticed was how the shine of the medal didn't match the holes in his shoes. The soles were coming off at the sides. When he walked too fast, his socks touched the ground. Beside him, Nia was curled in on herself a little, shoulders hunched against the wind. She was 13, wearing a faded t-shirt with paint stains on it, the kind nobody bothered to wash out anymore. In her hands, she held a crumpled flyer so tightly it had lines pressed into her fingers. The paper had a picture of a bright building with big windows and students smiling with portfolios in their hands. At the top, in bold letters, City School of Art and Design, Summer Program. At the bottom, in smaller letters that felt bigger, the tuition. Her thumb covered that part, pressing down like she could make the number disappear. They're never going to let me go there, she muttered, not really talking to him at first, just saying it to the empty air. Too far, too expensive. Too everything. He turned his head to look at her. The wind pushed a few strands of hair across her face, and she blew them away without thinking, eyes still on the flyer. She was biting her bottom lip the way she always did when she was scared or trying not to cry. That small, stubborn bite that said she'd already decided not to hope too much. He'd seen that look before when her dad left, when the landlord taped another notice on their door, when the art teacher told her she had real talent, but nobody at home had time to listen. Down below, the city buzzed like it always did. A siren wailed somewhere far off. A bus hissed as it pulled up to the stop at the corner. The usual arguing floated up from the sidewalk, two men debating about sports, too loud. It was all familiar, the noise, the smell, the heaviness. But up on the roof, with their feet kicking at the air, the world felt a tiny bit more distant, like it belonged to someone else. "One day I'm going to be rich," Darius blurted out. It slipped out before he could dress it up or laugh it away. The words hung there between them. He tried to make his voice light, like it was a joke, but there was something under it. That half-desperate edge he didn't know he had until he heard himself. Nia snorted, then laughed, a bright, surprised sound that burst out of her. It was his favorite sound in the world, that quick laugh that made the bad stuff step back for a moment. She shook her head. "Sure, and I'll have a gallery in Paris," she said, rolling her eyes for effect. He didn't laugh, not this time. Something in him straightened at the idea of her in Paris, standing in front of her own paintings, people whispering her name. The thought made his chest hurt, not in a bad way, just in a way that said he wanted it too much. "I mean it, Nia," he said quietly. She glanced at him, and the smile faded a little when she saw his face. He wasn't playing around. He stared straight ahead, out over the tops of the other buildings. where the skyscrapers in the distance were starting to light up like a separate universe. "I'm getting out," he went on. "I don't care how. I'll work, study, whatever it takes. I'm not staying stuck here forever." He thought of his mother, standing at the sink in their small kitchen, back aching, hands in dishwater, paycheck already gone before it came. Thought of the way she dragged herself up the stairs each night because the elevator had been broken since he was 9. Thought of the men on the corner who used to be promising before the block swallowed them up. That wasn't going to be him. He told himself that every time he did another math problem alone at the table, and when I'm rich, he swallowed. His heart was pounding now, fast and uneven. It wasn't just about getting out. There was something else, something he'd been holding in his chest for years without naming. The words tasted strange and huge on his tongue. "When I'm rich," he repeated, "I'll marry you. We'll leave all this." The sentence sat there between them like a dropped glass. It didn't shatter, it just waited. Nia went very still. The flyer slipped a little from her grip. She turned her head to look at him fully then. Really look. Not at the boy she'd grown up with, not at the kid who shared his chips and his secrets, but at something that had just shifted in front of her. His jaw was tight. There was a tiny muscle jumping by his temple. His eyes didn't leave the skyline, but his fingers were digging into the edge of the roof, knuckles pale. "You can't promise that," she whispered. It wasn't a rejection. It was something softer and sadder, like she'd seen enough broken promises in her short life to know how heavy they were, like she wanted to protect him from making one he couldn't keep. She turned her face back toward the city, but her eyes were glossed now, reflective. "I just did," he answered. It came out more stubborn than he meant it to, like a dare to the world. He didn't know about all the ways life could bend and twist and separate people. All he knew was the hot surge inside his chest that felt like certainty. At 14, that felt like enough. She didn't say yes, didn't say, "Okay, I'll wait," or "I'll hold you to it." She also didn't say no. Didn't laugh it off or push his shoulder or tell him to stop playing. Instead, she let out a small breath, like she was setting something down for a moment, and then slowly, carefully, she leaned. Rested her head against his shoulder, the side of her face fitting there like it had always been meant to. The city wind brushed past them, cooler now, tugging at their clothes, mixing their breaths. They sat like that as the sky deepened from orange to purple, to kids on a roof, holding onto a fragile future spoken into the open air. A year later, the scholarship letter came in a plain white envelope with the school's name printed neatly in the corner. It was a Saturday morning, and the kitchen was already hot even though the day had barely begun. Darius's mother turned the envelope over in her hands, eyes wide, fingers careful like it might break. "Baby, I think this is it," she whispered. He opened it with shaking fingers, eyes darting over the words, "We are pleased to offer you full tuition, room and board. A school 2 hours away by bus, but a world away in every other sense." His mother cried without even realizing she was crying, tears slipping down her cheeks as she laughed, as she hugged him too tight. "You did it," she kept saying into his hair. "You did it." He ran up the 4 flights of stairs, 2 at a time, to show Nia, bursting through her apartment door, out of breath, waving the letter. Her mom was at the table, folding laundry. There was a brief, strained smile and a "That's good, baby, that's real good," before she retreated back into her own worry. Nia followed him out into the hallway, then up to their roof. He watched her read the letter in the same spot where he'd made his promise. Her reaction was a knot of things all at once. Pride, clear and burning, fear tucked just behind it. "So, you're really going," she said. "Yeah," he breathed. "I'm really going." The day he left, the sky was gray and low. The suitcase by his side was borrowed, one wheel not rolling quite right. His mom clutched his shoulder at the bus station like she was afraid the wind would take him. He was taller now, still too thin, still wearing the same hoodie, but there was something new in his eyes, a mix of terror and hunger. Nia stood a little behind, hands shoved deep in her pockets, shoulders hunched in that same t-shirt with new paint stains. They didn't have a crowd, just the 3 of them, standing next to a faded bench with a peeling advertisement on it. "You'll call," she said, more as a command than a question. "I'll call," he promised. "Text, everything." They hugged, and it was supposed to be quick, friendly, the way kids who grew up together say goodbye. But when her arms went around him, his stayed there a second too long. Her face pressed into his chest, and for just a heartbeat, Everything on the platform blurred out. Then a bus engine roared, and the moment let go of them, he grabbed his suitcase. She stepped back. He waved from the window as the bus pulled out, and she lifted her hand, small and steady, until he turned the corner and was gone. At first, they did what they said they would. There were long, messy messages full of typos and pictures. He sent selfies from the dorm, from the big library that smelled like paper and possibility. From the cafeteria, where the food didn't taste like home but was free and hot, she sent pictures of her sketches, of the younger kids whose hair she started doing on the weekends for extra cash, of the mural she painted on the side of the community center. They had late-night calls where he talked about professors who used words he had to secretly Google later, about classmates who had never ridden a city bus in their life. She talked about her mom's second job, about her brother getting into trouble, about how the art program at her school kept losing funding. Sometimes they laughed until one of them had to cover the receiver to avoid waking somebody up. Sometimes there were long stretches where one of them just breathed while the other talked. Those calls stitched a thin, shaky thread between his new world and her old one. Then the gaps started. It wasn't on purpose, not at first. One week, he had 2 exams and a shift at the campus bookstore. He saw her name light up his phone and thought, "I'll call back after this lab." He didn't. Another time, her message came in while he was at a study group, surrounded by people who tossed around vacation stories and future internships like they were normal. He answered with a quick, "Busy," hitch you later. A day went by, then a week, then a month. Every time he thought of reaching out, the weight of everything he hadn't said got heavier. How was he supposed to explain the feeling of being too hood for his classmates and too changed for home? How was he supposed to tell her he sometimes laughed along when they joked about neighborhoods like Maple, even though it twisted something inside him? It felt easier to wait until he had better news, until he had become the version of himself he'd promised on that roof. Nia felt it from her side, the way his texts got shorter, the way his replies came mid-shift now, between customers at the salon where she had started sweeping hair after school. She told herself it was good, that he was busy doing what he was supposed to be doing. "That boy going places," her aunt said once, and Nia smiled tightly, nodding. "Yeah, he is." She kept sending little pieces of her life anyway. A picture of the salon sign when they finally painted it, a message about her mom's blood pressure, a blurry photo of a painting she stayed up all night working on. Sometimes he responded, sometimes he didn't. The last message she sent was simple. Late one night, after a long day when the house was finally quiet and she was lying in bed staring at the ceiling. "You good?" Just those 2 words, no pressure, no accusation, just a thin hand reaching out in the dark. The message sat undelivered and stayed there. A day, a week. A month she checked less often as time went on, but each time she did, the word hadn't changed. Delivered, like a letter slipped under a door no one opened. No answer, just silence. Slow and heavy, thickening around a teenage promise that had once been spoken into the wind on a rooftop, now drifting farther and farther away. The cafe sits where the old laundromat used to be, the one that ate quarters and spit back damp clothes and gossip. The big front windows are the same, but now there are plants lined up along the glass instead of detergent bottles, and a chalkboard menu hangs where the broken spin cycle special sign used to flicker. Outside, the bus stop is still there, the same metal bench with the same scratched-up ad, only the models on it have changed. Evening has settled in, and the streetlights are trying their best, buzzing to life, one by one, throwing yellow halos onto cracked pavement. Inside, it's quiet, a low hum of a refrigerator, a soft jazz track coming from a small speaker near the counter. The air smells like coffee and something sweet baking in the back. Darius sits at a small table by the window, the kind meant for 2 people who don't want to be overheard. His briefcase rests against his leg. His jacket hangs on the back of the chair. He keeps his hands wrapped around his cup even though the coffee has cooled. The warmth is gone, but the habit of holding on stays. Across from him, Nia sits with her shoulders slightly turned toward the window, like she's half in the room and half somewhere else. The streetlight outside catches her face at an angle, and for the first time, he sees the tiredness under her eyes that the salon lighting tried to hide. Those small, fine lines carved by years of early mornings and late nights. She isn't old, not at all, but life has pressed itself into her features in a way no filter can smooth out. Her cup sits on its saucer, untouched now, Her spoon moves in slow circles through the same cold coffee, metal tapping porcelain in a soft, steady rhythm. He notices the shine on his own wrist when he lifts his cup. The watch he bought after his first real bonus. He remembers the pride he felt then, the way he walked a little taller. Now, against the chipped table and the old gum stain under his shoe, it looks loud, out of place. He turns his wrist a little, as if hiding it will make the distance between them smaller. He talks first. Of course he does. Silence has grown between them for years. He feels like he has to fill it to prove he didn't just forget her and move on. The words come out in a rush at first, clumsy and crowded. He tells her about the nights he stayed in the library because his roommate was loud and the dorm walls were thin, and the only way to quiet his mind was to bury it in equations and economic models. He tells her about the side job stocking shelves before class, tutoring kids whose parents could pay, delivering food on a bike with bad brakes. He talks about sleeping on a friend's floor one semester when the loan payments and bills finally crashed into each other. Rich didn't just happen, he says, eyes on his cup. There was no day where a switch flipped and everything was suddenly easy. It was just one more hour, one more job, one more favor, slow, messy. His voice softens. I thought, once I had something to show you, it would make sense why I was gone, why I didn't call as much. She doesn't jump in, doesn't interrupt. She just listens, spoon circling and circling, tracing the same old route. He feels both grateful and exposed under that quiet attention. I didn't want you to see me failing, he admits, after a long pause. Still poor, still stuck. I told you I was going to get out. How was I supposed to call you and say, hey, I'm barely holding on, and this whole thing might fall apart? Her spoon stops. The tiny clink it makes against the side of the cup sounds louder now that the jazz song has faded into another, softer track. She looks up at him, and her gaze isn't hard. It's almost gentle in its clarity. So, you disappeared, she says. It's not a question, not an accusation with teeth. Just a clean, simple line of truth laid on the table between them. He flinches anyway. The word disappeared cuts through all the stories he wrapped around what he did. Got busy, lost track of time, didn't want to bother her. In her version, in the version that mattered, he disappeared. I kept meaning to call, he says quickly, feeling 12 years old again, caught in a small lie. I'd see your name in my phone and think, okay, after this exam, after this shift, after this one thing, then another thing would come, and then it felt too late somehow, like you'd moved on, like I'd be interrupting a new life you built without me. A small, sad smile touches the corner of her mouth at that, there for a second, and then gone. I had to, she replies softly. Life didn't wait for you, Darius. The way she says his name now is different from how she whispered it in the salon. There it was like she was dusting off an old book. Here it sits between them with the weight of everything they've lived, separately. He drops his gaze, and that's when he sees the ring again. Silver-toned, thin band, no stone, just a faint scratch near the top where it must have hit something hard. So, he starts hesitating as he lifts his eyes back to her hand. Your husband. She shakes her head before he finishes. Not married, she says quietly. Then, after a beat, not anymore. She looks down at the band herself, turns it once around her finger, a habit so practiced it's almost invisible, and last. He wants to ask what happened, who left first, if he hurt her, if she loved him. A knot of emotions forms in his chest, an odd guilty relief that there isn't a man waiting at home, and at the same time, a heavy sadness that someone else had the chance to love her and still didn't do right by her. He realizes this isn't the moment to ask for that story. He doesn't get to demand details just because he's finally curious. He begins, but the rest catches in his throat. Sorry, for what? For disappearing. For not being there when she probably needed someone. For assuming she'd be waiting at a window for him to come back rich. The word feels too small for all of it. She saves him from having to finish. Her hand slips into her bag instead, fingers moving past keys and a small bottle of lotion and whatever else she carries through her days. There's a pause, a tiny hesitation like she's thinking twice. Then she pulls something out, folded into a neat, worn square. I wasn't sure if I should show you this, she murmurs. The paper is yellowed at the edges, creased from being folded and unfolded too many times. She lays it gently on the table between them and smooths it out with her palm. He recognizes it before he fully sees it. His heart knows the shape of it. Thin, cheap printer paper, the kind they had at school. Pencil lines pressed deep enough to leave faint marks on the table if you looked close. 2 kids on a rooftop, backs against each other, legs crossed, the city spread out behind them in shaky, careful lines, a crooked moon in the corner. One of the kids has his hoodie, the other has her messy bun that he never quite got right on paper. "I drew this," he says, the memory sliding back in sharp detail. 14 years old, staying up late at the kitchen table with a blunt pencil, erasing and redrawing the same shoes over and over so they wouldn't look stupid. Feeling shy as he handed it to her the next day, mumbling something about just practicing. Her smile when she saw it, wide and open, like he'd handed her something worth money. "Turn it over," she says. He flips the paper. On the back, the handwriting is his, only younger. Bigger loops, darker pressure, like he was trying to carve the words into the page so they'd last. "When I'm rich, I'll marry you, promise." He remembers writing it, tongue between his teeth, heart pounding like it did on the roof that night. He'd slid it across the table, half hoping she'd laugh, half hoping she wouldn't. "I kept this," she says, her finger tracing the edge of the paper, not the words. Her voice is steady, but he can see the way her throat moves when she swallows. "Every time we moved, every time I cleaned out drawers, this always ended up in the keep pile." He looks up at her, question in his eyes. Why? After everything, after all the silence, why hold on to something drawn by a boy who didn't stay? "Not because of the money," she adds, almost reading his thoughts. "Not even because of the marry you part, though at 14 that sounded nice." There's a hint of a laugh that doesn't fully arrive. "I kept it because it felt like someone saw me, chose me, even when the world didn't." The cafe around them fades for a moment. No clink of cups, no hiss of milk foaming. Just her words, and the hum of something old breaking open. "You don't know what it was like sometimes," she goes on quietly. "Teachers liked my work, but there was never enough space, enough funding. My mom was busy surviving. Boys on the block saw what they wanted to see. I was useful. I braided hair, I watched kids, I listened, I fixed things." Her fingers tighten on the edge of the drawing. "But that night on the roof, for a second, you looked at me like I was more than the girl holding everything together, like I was worth planning a future around." Her voice shakes now, just a little, like there's a crack she's refusing to let widen. She takes a breath, lets it out slow. "But you didn't need to be rich for that, Darius," she says, eyes meeting his, clear and sad. "You just needed to stay." The sentence lands like a stone dropped in deep water. It sinks through all his practiced speeches about hard work and sacrifice, and doing this for us, it pushes past the badge of honor he wore about grinding his way up. It finds that boy on the roof and asks him a question he never thought to ask himself. What if being there had been enough? He looks at her, really looks, at the faint lines around her mouth that come from smiling at other people's kids, at the callus on her finger from holding a comb too many hours, at the way her shoulders carry themselves like they've had years of weight on them and learned to adapt. She isn't the girl waiting to be rescued that his imagination had painted. She is a woman who carried more than her share, who built something from broken pieces without a blueprint or a safety net. The power between them shifts, not in a loud, dramatic way, but in something smaller, quieter. He feels his role slip from savior returning home to the boy who left, and the label sits heavier than he expected. The story he told himself that he was coming back to fulfill a promise starts to feel thin. The real story, the one written in her eyes and on that worn piece of paper, is that he's finally facing the person who learned how to save herself when he chose to disappear. He opens his mouth, the word sorry right there, but it tastes different now. Less like a line and more like a beginning. He realizes that between "I'm sorry" and "I know," there's a long stretch of listening he hasn't done yet. Outside, a bus pulls up, brakes sighing, doors opening with a soft push of air. Inside, they sit with the drawing between them. The past and present folded into one thin sheet, and for the first time in a long time, he doesn't try to rush past the weight of what he left behind. They leave the cafe without really deciding to. One moment, they're sitting there with that old drawing between them. The next, they're both on their feet, cups empty, chairs pushed back in that awkward scrape that sounds louder than it should. The bell over the cafe door gives a soft ring when they step out. Different from the one at the salon, but carrying the same tired echo. The night has cooled. The heat that pressed down on the city all day has lifted, leaving behind a thin chill that brushes the back of Darius's neck. They fall into step side by side, without talking about it, heading toward Maple like two people following a map they drew years ago. The streetlights hum overhead, throwing weak cones of light onto the sidewalk. Storefronts, he half remembers, drift past. The bodega that used to sell stale candy and watery juice is now a phone repair shop with bright neon in the window. The old video store is a tax place with fluorescent lights and plastic chairs lined up inside. Some things have changed, but the cracks in the sidewalk are still in the same places. He has to stop himself from jumping over one out of habit. The city seems smaller than he remembered now that he's back on these blocks, like someone folded it in on itself when he wasn't looking. At the same time, it feels heavier. Every corner carries a memory. A fight, a first kiss, a police car slowing down to look at a group of boys just standing there. Beside him, Nia walks with her hands in her jacket pockets, shoulders relaxed, but not loose. There's an easy, uncertain silence between them, the kind that can tip either Y into comfort or back into distance. He sneaks glances at her, trying not to be obvious. The glow from a passing storefront slides across her face and then moves on. She looks older, of course, but it's more than that. There is a steadiness in the way she moves, like she knows exactly how much space she's allowed in a room and refuses to take less. She doesn't rush to fill the silence. She doesn't seem afraid of it anymore. That used to be him, the kid who could sit next to her on a rooftop for an hour without saying a word and somehow still feel like they were talking. They turn the corner, and the salon sign comes into view. Nia's natural beauty in curling letters, the paint still fresh enough to shine under the street lamp. He stops for a second when he sees her name up there, big and bold where everyone can read it. Part of him wonders if he has any right to say it out loud now. Outside the shop, she slows to a halt. The metal gate is halfway down, enough to show they're closed but not locked up for the night yet. She pulls her keys out of her pocket, the small jingle cutting through the sounds of a bus wheezing to a stop down the block. Her hand hovers near the lock, but she doesn't bend to open it yet. Instead, she stares at the faint reflection of themselves in the glass door. You know, she says, eyes still on the door, for a long time I thought I was waiting for you. The words catch him off guard. He had imagined a lot about what she'd say, but not this. His head turns toward her. She keeps her gaze straight ahead. That's what everyone expects from girls like me, right? She goes on, her voice even almost careful. To wait, to be patient, to be grateful. If someone comes back better, there's no bitterness when she says it, but there is a tired knowledge, like she's heard those expectations, spoken and unspoken her whole life. He feels something move inside his chest, a rush of defense rising to his throat. Nia? He begins, wanting to say, I never asked you to wait, or I thought I was doing it for us. He isn't sure which truth he would land on. She lifts a hand, just a few inches off her side, and he falls quiet. The gesture is small, but firm, not rude, just clear. It's her turn. I did wait, she admits, eyes lowering to the keys in her palm. A little, she lets out a small breath, something like a laugh with no humor in it. You'd text, you'd call, and I'd get this little spark like, okay, he remembers me, we're still us. She shrugs one shoulder. Then my mom got sick, real sick, the kind where you spend more time in waiting rooms than in your own bed. He can picture it, easily, her mom in a hospital gown that doesn't close right in the back. Nia in those hard chairs with her sketchbook on her lap, not drawing. Bills piled up, she continues. Rent, medicine, lights. I started taking more clients at the salon. Kids, grandmas, whoever walked in with $20 and a head of hair. Her fingers close around the keys, knuckles turning pale. I kept looking at my phone anyway. You know how stupid that feels. Waiting on a boy who only calls from some quiet dorm room hours away while you're trying to decide which bill not to pay that month. He doesn't answer. There is nothing to say that doesn't sound like excuse or defense. Her words aren't sharp. They don't cut for the sake of it. They just land, gently, but they land. Then, she says, voice dropping, I got tired. Tired of holding my breath for a boy who only loved me in the future, never in the present. He feels that line like a hand pressed flat against his chest. Loved me in the future. He thinks of all the times he whispered her name into a room she wasn't in. All the pictures he painted in his head of them in some high-rise apartment, far from Maple. How much of that was her, and how much was the idea of saving something he'd left behind? I thought getting rich would. He has to stop to clear his throat. It feels tight, like the words are thick. would make me worthy of you. She finally looks at him then. Really looks. And there's that sad little smile again, soft at the edges. You were worthy when you were broke, Darius, she says. You were just scared. He doesn't argue. He remembers being that boy. Counting change to buy a slice of pizza, standing in front of the art store window with her, pretending not to want what they couldn't afford. Feeling the weight of his mother's tired eyes every time he came home with another A, like it meant he had to fix everything. Fear was a constant then. Fear of staying, fear of leaving and failing, fear of needing someone more than they needed him. A kid runs past them suddenly, dragging a scooter behind him, one wheel squeaking with every bounce. He almost crashes into Darius's leg, mumbles a quick sorry, then keeps going, laughter trailing behind him. Down the block, a car rolls by with the windows down, bass thumping, a song spilling into the air that somebody in his building used to play on repeat. A couple argues quietly across the street about something small and urgent. Life goes on all around them, indifferent to their heavy little moment. So what now? He asks 3 words that come out lower than he intends, threaded with that same thin, shaking hope he had on the rooftop years ago when he promised her the world with empty pockets, and full belief she hears it. He can tell she does. Her eyes soften just a fraction, like she's seeing the 14-year-old version of him layered over the man in the suit. She turns her body toward him fully now, leaning back against the glass of the salon door. For a second, the reflection of the streetlight sits like a small halo over her head. Now she repeats, tasting the word. She lets a small silence sit between them, not rushing. Now, you stop trying to fix the past with money. Her tone is gentle but firm. You don't get to buy back years with dinners and gifts. That's not how this works. He nods slowly. He hadn't fully admitted to himself that this was what he'd been trying to do, but hearing her say it makes it obvious. Show up with success and hope it erases the nights she spent alone. You show up if you mean to, she continues. Not once. Not just today. Not just because you're feeling guilty or nostalgic. She tilts her head a little, and you let me choose. Not because of some promise we made at 14, up there on a roof, with our feet hanging off the edge, but because of who we are now, today. The words settle into the space between them like a new rule. Clear, fair. She's not holding out her hand and saying, take me. She's not slamming the door and saying, leave. She's doing something harder, leaving it open, but not empty. Making it clear that the next step isn't his alone to decide. He takes a slow breath, feels the cool night air fill his lungs, feels it leave. For the first time in a long time, he doesn't leap ahead in his mind to some scene where everything is fixed and perfect. He stays right there, on the sidewalk, with the distant siren and the blinking neon and the smell of hair products already seeping under the salon door. Can I start with coffee tomorrow? He asks. The question hangs there, small but honest. He doesn't add anything to it. Doesn't say, I'll make it up to you, or I'll prove myself. He feels how fragile the moment is, how much she's already carrying. So he keeps it simple. No promises, he adds quietly, just presence. She studies him, not just his suit or his watch or the way his hair is cut now. She searches his face like she's trying to see if the boy who drew her on that rooftop and wrote promise on the back is still somewhere in there. Her gaze lingers on his eyes, the lines at the corners that weren't there before. He holds still under it. Tomorrow, she says at last, giving a small nod, we'll see. It's not a yes that comes with fireworks. It's not a no that slams everything shut. It's something in between, the place most real things live. A door not open wide, but not locked either. She turns, then slides the key into the lock, and lifts the gate the rest of the way. The metal rattles up, warm light spills out for a moment, catching the bits of hair still on the floor, the reflection of empty chairs in the mirror. She steps inside and looks back at him over her shoulder once. Good night, Darius, she says. Good night, Naya, he replies. Then the door closes with a soft click. He stands there for a second, staring at the painted letters of her name, before he finally turns to go. As he walks away, he feels 2 things at once. Lighter, because the truth is out in the open now, not sitting like a stone in his pocket. He's not hiding behind future promises or polished success anymore. He's just a man who messed up, who left, who came back. Heavier, because coming back real means he can't control what happens next. He can't script her choices. He has to live with the fact that love isn't something you put on layaway and pick up when you're ready. He passes the bus stop where he once left this neighborhood with a suitcase and a heart full of plans. A bus pulls up now, doors hissing open, people climbing on with tired steps and headphones in. He could go anywhere. Back to his hotel, back to the new life he built. Instead, he keeps walking down the block, feeling the rhythm of the city under his shoes, the way it always was. A thought settles in his chest as he moves, quiet but sure. Nobody here needed him to come back rich. The people who mattered, the ones who saw him before any of this only, ever needed him to come back real. Without the armor, without the story. Just as he is. He thinks about that rooftop, about the boy who promised everything tomorrow because today scared him. And he realizes that maybe the bravest thing he can do now isn't to swear he'll never fail her again, or to sketch another big future in the sky. Maybe it's smaller than that, to show up for coffee, to answer when she calls, to listen when she speaks, to let her see him, not the version of himself he's been selling to the world. He reaches the corner and pauses, watching the light change from red to green. The cars roll forward, the city breathe. For once, he doesn't rush to step off the curb and chase the next thing. He just stands there a moment longer, fully inside this night, this street, this second chance that isn't promised but possible. And in that small pause, he understands. Sometimes, the real work isn't in building a future out there somewhere. It's in finding the courage to be fully here today.